Between Gold and Love. Part 1, A World Divided. I stood at the edge of a decision, one that would change my life forever. The world around me felt like it was spinning out of control, each choice carrying weight, each step echoing louder than the last. Two men stood before me, offering me two very different lives. One, a rich old man with a wealth that could buy anything. The other, a poor young man with nothing but a love that felt more real than anything money could offer. It all started a year ago, when I first met Bernard. Bernard Laurent was a man who had everything: money, power, connections. He was a business mogul, the kind of man who could command entire industries with a single phone call. His estate was a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, with gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly. It wasn't just his wealth that attracted me, it was the life he promised. "Don't you want to live a life of luxury?" He asked me one evening, his fingers brushing against my hand as we sat at a lavishly set table, sipping the finest wine money could buy. "I can give you everything. Every desire fulfilled. You will never want for anything." At first, I was hesitant. His proposal felt like a fantasy, a dream that could never come true. But the allure of a life without struggle, without the constant grind of making ends meet, was tempting. Bernard was a man who had lived long enough to know exactly what he wanted, and he believed he could offer me the same. But then, there was Alex. Alex Turner was the exact opposite of Bernard. He was young, only a few years older than me, but his life was completely different. He didn't own mansions or drive expensive cars. In fact, he barely had enough to pay rent on his small apartment in the city. He worked as a mechanic, fixing cars in a dusty garage that always seemed to smell of oil and gasoline. But when I met him, I saw something that Bernard could never offer: a raw, genuine kindness that radiated from his every gesture. "Do you ever wonder why the world works the way it does?" Alex asked one night as we sat on a park bench, sharing a quiet moment after dinner. The moonlight cast a soft glow over his face. "Why some people have everything while others have nothing? I don't understand it, but I do know that what we have, what we feel for each other, has nothing to do with money. It's real, and it's all that matters." His words were simple, but they struck me deep. The more time I spent with Alex, the more I realized that love wasn't something you could buy. It wasn't about luxury or status. It was about connection, about understanding, about being truly seen. And in Alex's eyes, I felt seen in a way that no one had ever made me feel. But the choice I faced now was not just about love. It was about the future. Should I choose the life of comfort and security Bernard could offer? Or should I take the risk of building a life with Alex, knowing it would be difficult, filled with uncertainty but grounded in something more real? As I stood at that crossroads, I thought back to how it all began, to the moment when I had first met both men, unaware that they would come to represent two completely different paths for my life. Part 2, Bernard's World. Bernard's world was one of wealth and privilege. When he invited me to his estate for the first time, I was overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of everything. The marble floors, the grand chandeliers, the rooms filled with art worth more than I could fathom. It wasn't just a home, it was a monument to a life of success. "You see, darling," Bernard had said as he led me through his mansion, "this is what life can be when you have ambition. When you work hard and make the right decisions, everything becomes possible. You could have this. You could have me." There was a part of me that couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. A part of me that thought, maybe this is what I deserve. A life without worry, without limitations. Bernard treated me like a queen, showering me with gifts and attention, taking me to the finest restaurants, buying me designer clothes, taking me on private jets to exotic destinations. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice something unsettling. Bernard's affection seemed to come with an unspoken price. The more I accepted his generosity, the more I felt like I was losing myself. He didn't ask for much, only that I stay by his side, be the perfect companion, and never question his choices. He was controlling in subtle ways, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a trophy to be displayed, rather than a partner to be cherished. And yet, whenever I tried to voice my concerns, Bernard would smile and brush them off, as if my fears were insignificant compared to the life he was offering. Part 3, Alex's simplicity. Alex, on the other hand, was the embodiment of simplicity. His world was far less glamorous, but it was honest. There were no lavish dinners or extravagant vacations. Instead, our time together was spent in quiet, intimate settings, long walks through the city, homemade dinners at his place, nights spent talking under the stars. It wasn't about money, it was about being present. The first time we kissed, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people drawn together by something pure. "I don't have much," Alex had said once, his fingers gently tracing my cheek, "but I can promise you this, I'll never lie to you, and I'll never leave you." And in those words, I found something that money couldn't buy. Trust. Loyalty. A promise of a life built together, not on material wealth, but on the kind of love that weathered storms. But the reality was hard. Alex's life wasn't easy. He worked long hours in a job that barely paid the bills, and his apartment was small and far from ideal. He couldn't offer me the comforts that Bernard could. There were no designer clothes or expensive dinners, no vacations to exotic places. But there was something else, something that no amount of money could replace. The problem was, it wasn't just about love anymore. I couldn't ignore the fact that Alex's future was uncertain. He didn't have the financial stability Bernard did. And I knew that a life with Alex would be a struggle, a life filled with sacrifices, but also with hope. Part 4, The Dilemma. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself torn. I loved Alex, but could I really choose a life of uncertainty over a life of comfort and luxury? Bernard was offering me everything I had ever dreamed of in terms of material wealth, but was it worth sacrificing my happiness for a life that felt more like a gilded cage? One evening, as I sat in Bernard's mansion, staring out at the glittering city below, I realized that I had to make a choice. My heart ached, torn between the two men. I had to decide which path to take. But the more I thought about it, the clearer the answer became. Part 5, The Choice. It wasn't an easy decision. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was making the right choice. But in the end, it was clear. I didn't need a life of wealth to feel fulfilled. I didn't need luxury to feel loved. I needed something real. And that something was Alex. Part 6, A Heart Unburdened. The day I told Bernard that I was leaving him was one of the hardest of my life. He had been nothing but generous, showering me with gifts and promises, yet I felt an emptiness growing within me, a deep sense that I was losing myself. When I sat across from him in his vast dining room, the weight of my decision hung heavily between us. "Are you sure about this?" Bernard asked, his voice calm but edged with something I couldn't quite place. "You're making a mistake, you know. The life I can offer you is one most people would kill for. It's a life of ease, of luxury. You can't find that with someone like Alex." His words stung, but I stood firm. "I don't need wealth to feel complete, Bernard. I need love. Real love. Not one that's controlled by what I can give you in return." There was a long silence. His eyes, once warm and welcoming, were now distant, as though a wall had been erected between us. But despite his anger, despite his pride, I could see the faintest trace of sadness in his gaze. It was the first time I saw him vulnerable, and for a fleeting moment, I almost regretted my decision. But then I thought of Alex, the way his laugh made me feel alive, the way his touch soothed me after a hard day, the way he saw me for who I truly was, not what I could bring to the table. Part 7, Building a Life with Alex. The first few months after I made my decision were filled with challenges. Alex and I were both figuring things out. He was still working long hours at the garage, and I had taken up a job at a local coffee shop to help pay the bills. Our apartment was small, but it was ours, filled with the kind of warmth that money couldn't buy. The nights we spent together felt simple, yet they were more meaningful than anything I had ever experienced. We cooked dinner together, watched movies on the couch, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. There was no need for grand gestures or material things. Our love was enough. But life wasn't without its difficulties. There were moments when I doubted whether I had made the right choice. On one particularly hard night, after a long shift at the coffee shop, I found myself staring out the window, feeling the weight of our struggles. We couldn't afford luxuries. There were times when we had to choose between buying food or paying rent. And still, we kept pushing forward. You know, when I first met you, I never thought we'd be here, Alex said one night, his voice thoughtful as we lay in bed. I didn't have much, but I knew I had something real to offer you. I just hope you know that you're everything to me. I kissed him gently, reassuring him with my touch. I know. And that's all that matters. Part 8, The Test of Time. As the months turned into a year, Alex and I faced more challenges. There were unexpected bills, health issues, and the ever-present stress of living paycheck to paycheck. But despite it all, our love never wavered. In fact, it only grew stronger. We learned to navigate the tough times together, finding comfort in each other's presence, in the simple joys of life. One day, after a particularly grueling week, Alex came home with a smile on his face. I got a promotion at the garage, he said, his eyes shining with excitement. I'm going to be the lead mechanic. It's a small step, but it's something. We're moving forward. I felt a rush of pride for him. It wasn't the same as Bernard's millions, but it was a step toward stability, toward a future we were building together. And in that moment, I realized that our love was worth more than all the riches in the world. Part 9, A Letter from the Past. Months later, while I was cleaning out some old boxes in the closet, I stumbled upon a letter. It was from Bernard, dated just a few weeks after I had left him. I opened it hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. His handwriting was elegant, but the words that followed made my heart ache. Dear, your name. I never thought I'd write to you again, but I can't help but feel that there's something unresolved between us. I respect your decision to leave, but I can't shake the feeling that I could have given you everything. You would have never had to worry about anything again. I hope you find what you're looking for, though I fear it's something I can't offer. Bernard. Reading his words made me feel conflicted. Bernard had given me everything I could have ever asked for, but I realized that it was never what I truly wanted. What I had with Alex was genuine, imperfect, but real. And that was enough. Part 10, The Promise of Tomorrow. The years that followed weren't without hardship, but they were filled with love. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends, and soon after, we found a bigger apartment that we could actually afford. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a home. We had children, and with them, a new sense of purpose. Looking back on it now, I know that choosing Alex was the right decision. We didn't have the wealth or the status Bernard could have provided, but we had each other. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. The world might have judged me for walking away from the security Bernard offered, but I knew that I had chosen the right path. A life of love, built on trust and respect, was worth more than any amount of money. It was the greatest treasure I could ever have. Epilogue, The Future Ahead. As I sit here now, with Alex by my side, watching our children grow and thrive, I am filled with gratitude for the life we have built. We've made it through the hard times, and we continue to make the most of every day. I look back on that moment when I had to choose between the rich old man and the poor young man, and I know without a doubt that I made the right choice. We didn't need a mansion to be happy. We didn't need a fortune to feel fulfilled. All we needed was each other. And that, in the end, was worth more than anything.